it is the moral behavior of the Yahweh character gives us a problem because it doesn't square with all the qualities of divinity listed in the New Testament, with all the qualities we're supposed to aspire to, according to the teaching of Jesus. And I think when the church has answered these questions in the past, it's essentially been by telling people to ignore their own conscience, that if God does it, it must be all right. And if you worship God, then you better come to terms with who God is and stay on his right side. The problem with these answers, where we have to shut down our conscience, is simply that if you worship a God who's violent, you have to justify violence. And once you've justified violence, then you might use violence in God's name. And we've had 2,000 years of history showing that's certainly the case. If you worship a God who's a xenophobe, you'll have to justify xenophobia and start thinking in xenophobic terms. These are my people, these are not my people. That's the way Yahweh thought. If you worship a God who is a misogynist, you have to justify misogyny. And Yahweh was a misogynist. He hated adult women.
Hmm.
He found the whole idea of menstruation disgusting and horrible, and women,
But
while menstruating, aren't even
but
part of the community.
but
If
but but
he's the
but he
creator
created.
God, how could, yeah, exactly. If he's the creator, how can he have a problem with that? And it's one of those little clues. You're dealing with a very eccentric being who should not be worshipped and should not be excused. But as soon as we get into the track of justifying his misogyny, his violence, and his xenophobia, you can draw a straight line between that and so many injustices and abuses done in the name of God because we're prosecuting God's will. So it's very important that we stop making mistakes of this order because they lead to disastrous results.
The early Hebrew beings or gods it was like it was a a polynyth I can't say polynythist um
It's a polytheistic
thank you,
worldview.
polytheistic worldview. Yeah, that were multiple. So it's very Hindu-esque in that sense. There doesn't seem like in India that there was somebody that came in and said, "Okay, let's take Ganesh, let's take Vishnu, let's take them all together," and there's only the one dude. There wasn't that happened there, but there were I didn't know that there were multiple gods, if you will, in early Hebrew in the Hebrew teachings originally.
Yes, and of course we have the vestiges of that worldview still in the stories of the Hebrew scriptures. So if you go to
Hmm.
the Ten Commandments, Yahweh begins by saying, I don't want you working for any other Elohim. I don't want you to bow down to them, and you're not even allowed to depict them. And of course, we're not supposed to ask, sorry, don't depict who? What other
Right.
Elohim are we talking about? Are we just talking about images and statues, or are we talking about other beings? And as you read the Elohim stories in the Hebrew scriptures, it turns out he's talking about other beings. And Yahweh has a very competitive relationship with these other beings. Joshua, in Joshua 24, he's a successor to Moses, says to the people, you need to decide who you're going to serve. Will you serve the Elohim that your ancestors served in Mesopotamia? Will you serve the Elohim of Egypt? Or will you serve Yahweh? So we've got this plurality of beings to choose from, but you're only to work for Yahweh.